Hi all. In today's video, we are going to explore how do we supply SSL certs to an application running on Kubernetes through the method of config maps. While in this case, we are going to base a scenario for Devtron, which is a GitOps, let's say, construct, having to communicate with a GitLab instance, which is a remote host, and is working through a self-signed certificate. Now, I need my Devtron instance to communicate with the GitLab instance. And unfortunately, Devtron doesn't let me, as such, turn off SSL validation. And hence, the communication would fail due to SSL validation errors because of the self-signed certificates. So in this case, we would supply the SSL certificate of the GitLab to the Devtron instance, which is on Kubernetes, through a config map. And this is not specific to Devtron and GitLab. This is just one of the scenarios, but there are similar scenarios, where you would like an application to consume a trusted certificate or to have a SSL certificate be trusted. Now let's look at my screen here. Okay, so let's look at my Devtron installation. Let's say kubectl get pods -n Devtron cd, and you can see there are a lot of different sub functions, or I would say modules within the entire Devtron. The one that I'm interested in is the main instance of Devtron. Okay, and this one, if I look at the IP address here, okay, kubectl get service -n Devtron cd. You can see that the Devtron instance is available at .16. So I'm going to pick up this particular IP address. Okay, I'm going to visit my Devtron instance here. Okay. And then to log in, I'll just retrieve the credentials. I need a password. So let's look at, okay, getting the admin password for the Devtron instance. And none of it relates again to the SSL activity that we are doing. I'm just logging into the Devtron instance here. You can see I'm just getting the password. Okay, let me log in. Okay, so this is my Devtron dashboard. If you haven't worked with Devtron, it's okay. Just try to relate to the fact that, what I'm trying to do is to connect Devtron to my GitOps, right? So I go to global configurations and GitOps and GitLab. Okay, so my GitLab instance is running on gitlab.oidc.cloudgarage.com. The port number is 10443. Okay, and I have a GitLab group ID created, which is 42. My user ID is Amber Sani. And let me copy my personal access token. So I'm going to put my personal access token here, and I'm going to try to save it. The moment I try to save it, the Devtron instance running on Kubernetes is going to talk to a remote host, which is my GitLab instance, available through this fully qualified domain name and this port number. This is the path. So you can see the clear error here. Error in connecting with GitLab, and certificate is signed by unknown authority. Now, due to this error, I would not be able to set up my GitOps functionality, and that's a big challenge for me. If it was an Argo CD or something else, generally, some of the providers would give you the option or a tick mark to turn off SSL validation. Unfortunately, I don't see this. So this is a very typical scenario, right? And requires my Devtron instance to be supplied with the SSL certificate in the trust store of Devtron, or else I need to sign or provide a valid SSL certificate for my GitLab, which may or may not be a possibility in many different use cases that are running internal to the enterprise for dev purposes, testing, or even for production purposes. Not a recommended one for production, but still, you never know. But the challenge right now, I think you very well understand. We are not able to communicate because of this particular issue. Now, what we are going to do is to resolve this issue, we're going to create a config map in Kubernetes and supply the SSL certificate of my GitLab as a data set, and then upload it or actually provide it in the trust store of the Devtron instance. Let's see how do we do that. Okay, so the first thing that we will do is we will declare a variable here, fqdn. Okay, you can see in the blog that I've mentioned, my URL for GitLab is this one. So I'm going to declare a variable called as fqdn equal to my fully qualified domain name. I'm going to go back to my Ubuntu machine from which I'm accessing the cluster and the applications running on my Kubernetes cluster. And I'm going to just declare this as a variable so that I can easily reuse them as part of the command set. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to create a CRT file, okay, based on OpenSSL. We're going to scan my FQDN, which is this particular URL, and running on port 10443, and then dump the dataset, which is the certificate, into a CRT file here. Okay, so let's do that. Let's also see if we have got the CRT file populated. You can see this is the certificate which has been now populated. So I have the certificate now of the GitLab. Now we're going to build the config map against this certificate. To do so, we will use this command, kubectl -n, which is the namespace, Devtron CD. Since the instance of Devtron is in this namespace, we will create the config map also in the same. Create config map from, and the name of the config map, I'm just going to keep it as GitLab-cert, could be anything from the file that we just created, the CRT file. Okay, so let's just take this command and paste it here, and you can see that the the config map is created. Let's verify. Describe config map GitLab cert -n Devtron CD. Okay, so you can see the certificate is populated and is available as data. The most important thing is that this key. Okay, you can see because I have used a file name, which is whatever $fqdn, and the variable resolves this GitLab OIDC cloudgarage.com.crt. This is the same file name which is actually provided as a key here. Okay, and the data against that is, this is very important because this is the key reference which will be used by any application when you define the volume and the config map reference, right? This key is very important here actually. Okay, now we have the certificate presented as a config map. Now either we can do this manually. Okay, for example, I can go to Cube editor, let's say Nano, I prefer Nano, and we can edit the deployment of Devtron in the namespace Devtron CD. Okay, and you can see that this is the running configuration of my deployment, and here I can go and specify against the containers. I can create a volume mount and the associated volume. You can see there is already a volume mount, so I can append this manually by creating another mount path, and the trust store, which is the /etc/SSL and certs. I can give a subpath there and give the file name and all that. But instead of doing that manually, what we can do is we can just run a short script here. Okay, a simple bash always helps here. So what we are doing, so I'm going to retrieve this deployment of Devtron in the namespace of Devtron CD and output spit it out as a YAML file as a temporary hold. And when I do that, you can see, right? I mean, if I just run this particular command, okay, it would do the same thing. It will give me the YAML file of my Devtron deployment, right? Then what I'm doing is basically once I retrieve this file, I'm going to use the SCD commands and a combination of echo to append after the statement volume mounts colon these three statements: mount path /etc /SSL certs and FQDNs $FQDN CRT, which means inside of the container, which is actually running Devtron, I'm going to map this particular mount path, okay, and the sub path, which means the exact file name, okay, through a volume, which is another set of volume $. You can see I'm putting one more as a config map. And this is the same config map that we actually created earlier, named as GitLab cert, right? You can see here the reference. So this chaining of volume mount and volume basically maps this particular directory of etc SSL certs and a .crt file, which is also presented through a subpath to be exactly specific, saying that this file is going to be read from the config map, and the config map, that has the certificate in that, right? Now, because the file will be loaded up in the etc SSL certs directory, it would be placed in the trust store, obviously, and then what would happen is Devtron should be able to look up on that particular CRT file as a trusted certificate because it's there in the etc SSL certs directory, and we should be able to kind of communicate successfully without getting that SSL validation error. This is just a bit of basic scripting. So I'm going to get the YAML as a temporary hold, do the replacements to insert these statements into that Devtron CD YAML, and just issue the command replace -f, right? So that a new Devtron instance is created. Let me take this. You can see as of now, there is no reference to that config map and whatsoever, and hence we are getting the error. So let me run this command. Okay. So we can see that the deployments.app Devtron has been replaced. If I say get pods -n Devtron CD, you can see this one has been restarted. Yeah. 13 seconds. Yeah, 13 seconds. Okay. This is the fresh one that we did one. I mean, this is the replacement that has come in. Let's just again verify. Okay, cool. Now, as of now, basically, we can actually go into this Devtron instance and let's see what's happening inside the container. So let's say kubectl exec -it, this pod -n Devtron CD /bin/bash. Okay, that's okay. /etc/SSL/certs, and we are inside of the Devtron container. And we can see that I can see inside of the container, this particular file or the certificate is available. This is through the config map reference that we provided. And we can do more on this to see if we can actually see the certificate, and we can see inside of the container now through the config map, my GitLab instance certificate is already there, which means now at this moment, if I try to save this configuration, which I was not able to do it earlier. Let's see if it works. So you can see clearly configurations validated, which means that Devtron instance is now able to communicate with my GitLab host, and there are no SSL validation errors that we see. So again, this brings us to a close of this simple exercise, but this is a typical issue in many different use cases, and I've seen it on the internet, people seeking for answers, of how to do this. Again, like I said, this is Devtron and GitLab. It could be a different set of application, right? One running on Kubernetes, and anywhere else, the second application runs on Kubernetes or on a different cluster or a non-Kubernetes, and self-signed certificates, and a typical issue, right? That's about it. Thanks a lot. Cheers.